COVID-19 shook the world, claiming millions of lives and forcing us to confront just how fragile humanity can be in the face of a global crisis. Yet, it probably still ranks the lowest on the severance scale compared to the other events that could have caused us to perish. The year is 1918. The world was still fresh from the devastation of World War I. Nations poured their resources into military power, leaving medical and scientific advancements neglected. When the war ended, people celebrated. They were grateful to have survived the battlefield, but they didn't realize that the Spanish flu would be even deadlier. In just 1 year, the flu infected an estimated 500 million people. At the time, that was about 1/3 of the global population. Its death toll is staggering. Estimates range from 17 million to 50 million lives lost, and some argue it could have been as high as 100 million. To put that into perspective, COVID-19 has caused about 7 million deaths, roughly 0.087% of the global population. The Spanish flu, however, claimed up to 100 million lives, or 5.5% of the global population, making it more than 60 times deadlier. And unlike COVID-19, which disproportionately affects the elderly, the Spanish flu often struck down healthy young adults in their prime, amplifying its devastating impact. The Spanish flu earned the nickname Purple Death for the way it turned its victims' skin a bluish-purple hue due to lack of oxygen. But it wasn't the first pandemic to strike terror across the globe. Centuries earlier, another colourful killer left an even darker mark on history. In the 14th century, life was already rough. Hygiene wasn't exactly a priority. Cities were crowded cesspools of filth, and the best medical advice you could get was, maybe try some leeches. People thought the stars, bad air, or even your sins caused diseases. Science hadn't exactly hit its stride yet. Then, in 1347, things went from bad to apocalyptic. The Black Death arrived, a pandemic so deadly, it reshaped history. Over the next few years, it wiped out an estimated 75 to 200 million people, killing up to 60% of Europe's population, leaving entire regions eerily empty. The culprit was Yersinia pestis, a bacterium carried by fleas that hitched rides on rats. Once it jumped to humans, it spread like wildfire, but thankfully not fast enough to end humanity. The disease relied on ships, caravans, and foot traffic to travel, which limited its speed. But had it been in today's hyper-connected world, we wouldn't be so lucky. The Black Death eventually ran out of steam, partly because it killed so many people that it slowed its own spread. Not exactly a comforting thought. Still, pandemics weren't the only thing trying to erase us from existence. Long before the Black Death, nature itself took a shot, and it almost succeeded. 74,000 years ago, small groups of early humans roamed the land, hunting, gathering, and doing their best to survive in a world full of predators and harsh conditions. Life was tough, but they were trying. Then, nature decided to turn up the difficulty, and deep in what is now Indonesia, the Toba Supervolcano erupted. This wasn't your average volcanic eruption. It spewed 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash into the atmosphere, enough to cover a country the size of Canada in several inches of volcanic dust. The sky darkened as ash clouds spread across the globe, blocking out the sun and plunging the planet into a volcanic winter. Temperatures plummeted by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some areas, and the cold lingered for nearly a decade. With crops failing and ecosystems collapsing, survival became a game of chance. Genetic studies suggest that the human population dwindled to as few as 1,000 to 10,000 individuals, which wouldn't fill up a football field today. The Toba eruption didn't just scar the land, it left its mark on us too. Scientists believe it caused a genetic bottleneck, a drastic reduction in genetic diversity that we can still see in our DNA today. The incident brought humanity to the brink, but we survived, barely. As time passed, humans began to rebuild, adapting to their environments and slowly growing in number. But nature wasn't done. 10,000 years ago, the Ice Age came to an end. Melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise by as much as 120 meters, submerging vast areas of land. Entire ecosystems collapsed, and humans were forced to adapt to a world transforming before their eyes. Food sources disappeared, climates shifted, and survival became a constant struggle. Humanity's numbers dwindled, and the threat of extinction loomed large once again. But humans fought back this time. Communities migrated to more hospitable regions, learned to cultivate crops, and domesticated animals to ensure a more stable food supply. These innovations not only helped them survive, but also laid the groundwork for civilization as we know it. But now, thousands of years later, we're facing another era of rapid climate change. Only this time, we're the ones causing it, and somehow, it still isn't the biggest threat to modern life. In 1962, a Soviet submarine, B-59, found itself in dangerous waters near Cuba. US Navy forces, unaware of the submarine's nuclear payload, dropped depth charges as a warning to force it to surface. What they didn't realize was that the submarine's crew believed war might have already broken out. On board, tensions were sky high. The submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, was ready to launch a nuclear torpedo, convinced that the situation was hopeless. Launching the torpedo would have almost certainly triggered full-scale nuclear war. But there was one safeguard in place. Launching the weapon required the unanimous approval of 3 senior officers. Savitsky and political officer Ivan Maslenikov were prepared to go ahead. Only Vasily Arkhipov, the submarine's second-in-command, stood in the way. Arkhipov argued against the launch, insisting they confirm the situation before taking such a catastrophic step. After a tense debate, he managed to convince the others to hold off, and he was right. His decision effectively saved the world from descending into nuclear chaos, but just 2 decades later, a computer glitch almost finished the job. In 1983, during the height of the Cold War, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were running dangerously high. On September 26th, deep within a Soviet bunker, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov sat at his post, monitoring the Soviet early warning system designed to detect incoming nuclear missiles. Suddenly, the alarms blared. The system reported that 5 US missiles had been launched and were heading straight for the Soviet Union. Protocol demanded an immediate retaliation, an all-out nuclear strike in response. The pressure was immense, and the clock was ticking. Yet, Petrov hesitated. Something about the alert didn't sit right with him. 5 missiles seemed like an oddly small number for a first strike. Defying orders and the protocols designed to ensure a swift response, Petrov trusted his instincts. He chose to report the alert as a false alarm rather than escalate to his superiors. And he was right. The warning system had malfunctioned, misinterpreting sunlight reflecting off clouds as missile launches. Petrov's decision saved humanity from a nuclear war that could have obliterated modern civilization for the second time. But as the French saying goes, never 2 without 3. In 1995, on January 25th, Russian radar systems detected what appeared to be a missile launch off the coast of Norway. The object was on a trajectory that resembled a US nuclear missile targeting Moscow. Russian forces quickly escalated the alert level, and for the first time in history, Russia's nuclear briefcase, commonly known as the nuclear football, was activated. President Boris Yeltsin was informed and had mere minutes to decide whether to launch a retaliatory strike. As the clock ticked down, military officials were convinced this could be the opening act of a nuclear war. But Yeltsin hesitated. Something about the situation felt off. Why would the US launch just 1 missile? And where was the accompanying swarm that a true first strike would involve? As it turned out, the object detected by Russian radars wasn't a missile at all. It was a scientific rocket launched by Norwegian and American scientists to study the aurora borealis. The rocket's trajectory had been shared with Russia ahead of time, but the message had never made it to the right channels. Extinction has teased humanity more times than we'd like, but it could all end anticlimactically in an instant. A rogue black hole could stroll in uninvited, or vacuum decay could erase us faster than you can say, "Wait, what's vacuum decay?" But let's keep those existential crises for other videos.